The village of Oakhaven lived on the edge of a memory. To its east, rolling green hills and sun-drenched fields stretched as far as the eye could see. To its west, however, lay the Vale of Whispers, a permanent, churning wall of violet-gray mist that swallowed the light and bled all color from the land it touched. No one born in the last century had ever seen the mountains that were said to lie beyond it. The Vale was not merely fog. It was a wound upon the world, a place of unnatural silence where strange, twisted things were said to lurk. The only things protecting Oakhaven were the ancient warding stones, tall monoliths of pale rock that hummed with a faint warm energy, placed in a circle around the village by ancestors long forgotten. In this village lived Kael, a young man who felt as much on the edge of things as Oakhaven itself. An orphan raised by the community, he had no land to his name, earning his keep by doing the tasks others avoided. His most important duty, and the one he strangely cherished, was tending to the warding stones. Every day he would clean the moss from their surfaces, clear the weeds from their bases, and whisper words of thanks he'd learned from Alara, the village elder. While others felt a sense of dread near the Vale, Kael felt a peculiar calm. He would watch the sunlight struggle at the mist's edge, feeling a deep, inexplicable ache in his chest, a yearning for the light to finally break through. He was a quiet youth with thoughtful gray eyes and hair the color of dark soil. He didn't have the brawn of the blacksmith's sons or the quick wit of the traders, but he possessed an unnerving stillness. Sometimes, when he focused on the faint light emanating from the warding stones, he could almost feel its rhythm, like a slow, steady heartbeat. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, a chill unlike any other descended upon Oakhaven. It wasn't the cold of winter, but a deep, bone-aching cold that seemed to emanate from the Vale itself. The cheerful sounds of the village, the laughter of children, the clanging from the smithy, the lowing of cattle, died down into a tense silence. Kael was on his final round, checking the northernmost warding stone, when he saw it. The stone's gentle hum was faltering. Its warm, protective light flickered erratically, like a dying candle in a strong wind. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his usual calm. The stones had never faltered before. He placed his hand on the cold rock, trying to will his own warmth into it, a foolish, childish gesture. As he did, a low, guttural hiss echoed from the mist just beyond the warding line. The sound was wrong, a discordant note in the symphony of nature. It was a sound of decay and hunger. Kael's head snapped up. From the churning gray of the Vale, a figure began to coalesce. It was a Shadeborn, a creature of nightmare that the elders only spoke of in hushed, fearful tones. It was vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were too long and thin, bending at impossible angles. Its skin was like stretched, gray parchment pulled taut over sharp bones, and its face was a featureless canvas save for two deep black pits that seemed to drink the very light from the air. It moved with a twitching, unnatural grace, its claws scraping against the ground. The grass it stepped on withered and turned black instantly. The creature ignored Kael, its empty gaze fixed on the flickering lights of the village proper. Panic seized the village. A cry of terror went up from a woman who had seen the creature from her window. People scrambled for their homes, barring doors and shuttering windows. But a small child, a little girl named Lyra who had been chasing a firefly, stood frozen in the path, her eyes wide with terror. The Shadeborn turned its head towards her, a predator sensing easy prey. Something inside Kael broke. The analytical calm, the quiet acceptance. It all shattered. He saw not a monster from a legend, but a direct threat to the innocent. Without thinking, without a plan, he ran, placing himself between the creature and the girl. He had no weapon, only the small utility knife at his belt. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. The creature hissed again, a sound of annoyance, and raised a clawed hand. In that moment of absolute desperation, as Kael braced for the end, the strange ache in his chest exploded into a raging fire. It wasn't pain, but an overwhelming surge of energy, of warmth, of light. He threw his hands up instinctively, a desperate shield, and a brilliant golden light erupted from his palms. It wasn't a fire. but a pure, blinding luminescence that was as warm as the midday sun. The light washed over the Shadeborn. The creature shrieked, a piercing sound of agony that tore through the night. It recoiled as if struck by a physical blow, its gray skin sizzling and smoking wherever the light touched it. The pure energy was anathema to its very being. It scrambled backward, its unnatural form dissolving back into the cloying mist of the veil, the terrible shriek echoing until it was swallowed by the silence. The light from Kael's hands faded, leaving him on his knees, panting, his arms trembling from the unfamiliar power that had just coursed through him. The village was silent for a moment, then doors creaked open. The girl's father rushed out, scooping her into his arms. Everyone stared at Kael, not with gratitude, but with a mixture of awe and fear. He had done the impossible. He had driven back the dark. But how? What was he? Before anyone could speak, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the tension. Enough. The boy is exhausted, and the ward is weak. Ilara, the village elder, walked through the stunned crowd. Her face, a roadmap of wrinkles, was grim. But her ancient eyes, usually filled with gentle wisdom, now held a sharp, knowing intensity. She helped Kael to his feet, her grip surprisingly strong. She looked at his trembling hands, then into his wide, confused eyes. "The old blood awakens," she murmured, her voice too low for anyone else to hear. "The world has forgotten, but the shadow remembers. Your journey, Kael, has just begun." The short walk from the northern warding stone to Ilara's hut felt longer than any journey Kael had ever taken. The villagers parted before them, their faces a mixture of the fear he had seen earlier and a new, unsettling suspicion. He was no longer just Kael, the quiet orphan. He was something other, something unknown and powerful. He heard the whispers trailing behind him. What was that light? Is he cursed? The veil has marked him. The words were like tiny, sharp stones, and for the first time in his life, the community that had raised him made him feel utterly alone. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground, the weight of their stares pressing down on him. Ilara's hut was nestled at the very edge of the village, small and unassuming, built of river stone and dark wood. But the moment she pushed the heavy oak door open, a sense of peace enveloped Kael, pushing back the chill of the evening and the villagers' fear. The air inside was warm and smelled of dried herbs, old parchment and wood smoke from the gentle fire crackling in the central hearth. Shelves overflowed with clay pots, leather-bound books, and bundles of plants Kael couldn't name. It was a place of deep, quiet knowledge. Ilara guided him to a small wooden stool by the fire and handed him a cup of steaming herbal tea. Her movements were slow and deliberate, designed to soothe his frayed nerves. For a long moment, the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the frantic beating of Kaela's own heart. Finally, he found his voice, a raw whisper. "Ilara, what happened? What was that thing?" And the light. "It came from me." Ilara sat opposite him, her ancient eyes reflecting the firelight. "What you saw was a Shadeborn," she began, her voice calm and steady. "A creature of the veil, born of the corruption that festers there. They are drawn to fear and decay, and they despise all that is pure and alive." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "And the light, Kael, that was you. It is a power that runs in your blood, an echo of a time long past. It is called Lightweaving." Kael stared at her, bewildered. "Lightweaving? I don't understand. I'm nobody. My parents were farmers who were lost to a fever." A sad smile touched Ilara's lips. "The family that raised you were farmers, yes. But your true lineage, the one that flows in your veins, is far older. You are a descendant of the first dawn, an order of protectors who could channel the pure essence of light. It was they who raised the warding stones. They were guardians against the encroaching dark. But the lineage thinned, the knowledge was lost, and people began to forget. As the light faded from the world, the shadow grew bolder. The veil of whispers is the result of that forgetting." She stood and walked to a heavy wooden chest in the corner. From it she retrieved a rolled-up piece of parchment, yellowed and cracked with age. She unrolled it carefully on the table. It was a map of the kingdom as it was centuries ago. The western part of the map, where the Vale now lay, showed majestic mountains and a great, shining city. This was Eridor, the sunken city, Ilara said, her finger tracing over the faded ink. The central sanctuary of the Lightweavers. It was said to be built around a crystal that magnified the sun's light 1,000-fold. But it fell, and as it did, the corruption began to spread, creating the Vale. Kael's mind reeled. Lightweavers, a sunken city. It was the stuff of children's tales. But why me? Why now? Because the Vale is growing stronger, Ilara said, her voice turning grim. The warding stone you tended to tonight. Its light did not just flicker, it is dying, Kael. The ancient magic is failing. Its weakness was a crack in our defenses, allowing that Shadeborn to test our strength. Soon, that crack will become a gaping hole, and all of Oakhaven will be consumed. The reality of her words hit him like a physical blow. His home, the only one he'd ever known, was in mortal danger. So what do? We have to fix the stone. It is not so simple. The knowledge of their creation is lost to us, she replied. But the power to mend them lies within you. The light you unleashed was raw, instinctive, a desperate cry for survival. But it can be controlled. It can be shaped. It can be a tool for creation, not just a shield of defense. She picked up a small withered flower from a pot on her windowsill. Its petals were brown and curled, its stem limp. The light within you is life, Kael. Try. Reach for that warmth you felt, but do not force it. Coax it out. Focus on this flower. Think of the sun on a clear morning, of new growth, of life. Kael looked at the dead flower, then closed his eyes. He tried to find the fire in his chest, but there was only fear and confusion. He strained, but nothing happened. He opened his eyes in frustration. I can't. It was an accident. Do not think of it as a weapon, Ilara counseled gently. Think of it as a part of you. It responds to your will, to your spirit. What do you cherish, Kael? What gives you hope? He thought for a moment. He thought of the sun rising over the eastern hills, a promise of a new day. He thought of the sound of Lyra, the little girl, laughing as she chased fireflies, a sound of pure, untainted joy. He held that feeling, that warmth in his mind. He reached out his hand over the flower, and this time, he did not force it. He simply opened himself to the possibility. A soft, gentle glow, no brighter than a firefly, bloomed in his palm. It was not the blinding eruption from before, but a peaceful, warm radiance. The light trickled down from his fingertips, enveloping the withered flower. As he watched, mesmerized, the brown stem began to regain its color, turning from brown to a vibrant green. The curled petals slowly unfurled, revealing a soft sky blue color he had never seen before. In a matter of seconds, the dead flower was alive, and in full, perfect bloom. Kael stared in utter disbelief, a gasp escaping his lips. He had done that. He had commanded life back into something that was gone. A profound sense of wonder washed over him, momentarily eclipsing his fear. Ilara nodded, a look of solemn pride on her face. You see, it is your nature. But this is only the beginning. Mending a flower is one thing. Mending the heart of a warding stone is another. The power within you is a mere spark. To save Oakhaven, you will need a flame. She rolled up the ancient map and pressed it into his hands. Her gaze was intense, her words leaving no room for argument. You cannot stay here, Kael. The villagers fear what they do not understand, and your presence will only bring more danger. You must journey to find the lost knowledge of your ancestors. You must become strong enough to restore the wards. Your path lies west, into the very lands the Vale has claimed. You must seek what was lost. Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with a desperate hope. You must find the sunken city of Eridor. There was no ceremony to Kael's departure. He left before the sun had fully risen, under the cloak of a pre-dawn gray that mirrored the turmoil in his heart. Ilara met him at the edge of the village, pressing a heavy wool cloak into his hands, dyed a dark gray to blend with the shadows he would soon enter. She also gave him a satchel filled with hard bread, dried meat, and a water skin, provisions that seemed pitifully small for the journey ahead. In his pocket, he clutched the ancient map. "The Vale is more than just mist and monsters, Kael," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "It is a place of despair. It will feed on your fear, whisper your deepest doubts into your ear, and try to convince you to surrender. You must not listen. Your light is fueled by hope. Cling to it, even when it feels like a distant star." She then placed a small, smooth, white stone into his palm. It was cool to the touch but seemed to hum with the same latent energy as the great warding stones. "This is a life stone, a fragment from a fallen ward. It holds a memory of the light. When your own hope falters, hold it. It will remind you of what you are fighting for." Kael nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He looked back at Oakhaven. The village was still asleep, a collection of dark, silent shapes. In one window, he thought he saw a flicker of a candle and the small silhouette of the girl Lyra watching. Or perhaps it was just his imagination. He was leaving everything he had ever known to chase a story, a legacy he still barely believed was his. With a deep breath that felt like a final goodbye, he turned his back on his home and faced the churning violet wall of the Vale of Whispers. Stepping into the mist was like plunging into icy water. The air grew instantly cold and heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The cheerful sounds of the world behind him were snuffed out, replaced by an oppressive silence that was somehow full of noise, the faint, incessant whispering at the edge of his hearing. The voices were formless, like the rustling of dead leaves, but the intent was clear. You are alone, so small you will be consumed. The world inside was a monochrome nightmare. The vibrant greens and browns of the forest gave way to a palette of grays, blacks, and sickly purples. The trees were gnarled, skeletal things, their branches twisted into agonizing shapes, dripping a black, viscous sap. The ground underfoot was soft and yielding, less like soil and more like a layer of ash and rot. He clutched the life stone in his pocket, its faint warmth a small anchor in this sea of desolation. He followed the map as best he could, navigating by the shape of crumbling hills and the direction of dead, petrified streams. The whispers grew more insidious, sometimes taking on the cadence of villagers he knew, mocking him. "He thinks he's a hero, the monster will save us." Kael gritted his teeth, focusing on the memory of the flower blooming in his hand, on the warmth of Alara's tea, on the mission she had given him. He had to keep walking. Hours bled into one another in the timeless twilight of the Vale. As the true darkness of night began to bleed through the mist, he knew he had to find shelter. It was then that he heard a new sound, cutting through the whispers, the snap of a twig, followed by a low, predatory growl. He froze, his hand instinctively going to the small knife at his belt. From the shadows between the twisted trees, glowing yellow eyes appeared, then another pair, and another. A pack of creatures emerged, their forms clearer than the Shadeborn but no less terrifying. They were like large wolves, but their fur was patchy and mangy, their skin a sickly gray. Bony spurs jutted from their spines, and their teeth were long, needle-like shards. Gloomfangs, one of the terrors Alara had warned him about, pack hunters corrupted by the Vale's influence. There were 5 of them, and they began to circle him, their growls a constant rumbling threat. Their yellow eyes were filled with a malevolent intelligence. Panic flared in Kael's chest. He remembered Alara's words. "Your light is fueled by hope." But hope was hard to find when surrounded by death. One of the Gloomfangs lunged, acting on pure instinct. Kael threw up a hand. A burst of light brighter than he intended erupted from his palm. The creature yelped and scrambled back, momentarily blinded, but the others were not deterred. They were learning, spreading out to attack from different angles. He was too slow, his control too clumsy. As he focused on one, another darted in from the side, its claws tearing through his sleeve and leaving a set of deep, burning gashes on his forearm. Pain, sharp and hot, shot up his arm. The sight of his own blood made the whispers in his head scream with triumphant glee. "You're weak, you're bleeding, you are ours." Despair began to wash over him. His light flickered. Then, his fingers brushed against the life stone in his pocket. A faint warmth pulsed from it, a steady rhythmic beat like a distant heart. Oakhaven. Ilara. Lyra. He wasn't just fighting for himself. With a roar born of desperation, he focused not on attacking, but on creating a shield. He slammed his hands together and poured every ounce of will he had into them. A dome of shimmering golden light exploded outwards from him. It didn't burn the gloom fangs, but it threw them back with immense force, and the pure, holy energy was an agony for them to behold. They snarled and shrieked, clawing at their eyes before turning and vanishing back into the suffocating mist. Kael collapsed to one knee, the dome of light fading into nothing. He was breathing in ragged gasps, his arm screaming in pain. He had survived, but barely. He knew he couldn't stay there. Staggering to his feet, he pushed onward, driven by adrenaline and fear. Just as he felt he could go no further, he saw it through the mist, a faint, steady glow. It was different from the malevolent yellow eyes of the gloomfangs. It was a soft, white light. Drawing closer, he found a small, overgrown ruin. A collapsed stone archway with a single small monolith standing within it. It was a Lightweaver way station, one of the safe havens marked on his map. The small warding stone at its center was weak, but it was still active, carving out a small circle of safety in the oppressive darkness. He stumbled inside the ward's perimeter and collapsed, the whispers and the bone-deep chill of the veil instantly receding. He was safe for now. He looked down at the deep gashes on his arm, the pain burning like fire with every heartbeat. Remembering the flower, he wondered if the same principle could apply. He placed his free hand over the wound. He closed his eyes, ignoring the throbbing pain, and focused on the feeling of wholeness, of skin mending and blood stilling. He drew on the gentle light, not a blinding flash, but a soft, warm stream of energy. He poured it into his own injury. A warm, tingling sensation spread through his arm. When he opened his eyes and removed his hand, he saw the bleeding had stopped, and the raw edges of the wound had begun to close, knitting themselves together. It was not fully healed, but the worst of the damage was undone. Exhausted but alive, he sat with his back against the small warding stone, its gentle warmth seeping into him. He pulled out the map. The small X he had made to mark Oakhaven seemed a world away. The journey to Eridor was a long, perilous line across a vast, unknown territory. The howls of the gloomfangs echoed in the distance, a stark reminder that the sanctuary was temporary. But as he looked at his mending arm, a new feeling took root in his heart, pushing back the despair. It was determination. He had faced the shadow and he had survived. The path was dark, but for the first time he truly believed he held the spark that could light the way. Kael left the sanctuary of the way station as a sliver of gray light announced another day within the veil. The brief respite had hardened his resolve. For several days he journeyed westward, a solitary figure against a desolate landscape. The world around him shifted from the skeletal forest to the whispering fens, a vast swampy marsh where the violet mists clung low to the ground, and the air was thick with the stench of stagnant water and rot. Bubbles of foul-smelling gas broke the surface of black pools, and the whispers here were wetter, more sibilant, like serpents slithering at the edge of his perception. His progress was slow and arduous. He learned to test the ground before each step, to distinguish the groaning of waterlogged trees from the sounds of things that lurked beneath the surface. He grew leaner, and the thoughtful quietness in his eyes was replaced by a sharp, hunted watchfulness. His light, which he practiced controlling in moments of quiet, was his only comfort. He learned to summon a small, steady globe of it to light his path, a miniature sun that kept the darkest of the shadows at bay. But he knew it also made him a beacon, a target in the gloom. It was this very light that led him into a trap. While navigating a particularly dense patch of petrified reeds, his foot snagged on a taut vine hidden just beneath the murky water. Before he could react, a crudely constructed net, weighted with rocks and bones, sprang from the ground, enveloping him and hoisting him several feet into the air. He cried out in shock, dropping his globe of light, which fizzled out as it hit the water. He was trapped, tangled and helpless, a fish caught in a fisherman's net. Rough laughter echoed from the reeds. 3 figures emerged, their forms as wretched as the landscape. They were men, but barely. Dressed in rags and patched leather, their skin was pale and grimy, their eyes holding a feral, desperate glint. They were scavengers, the dregs of humanity who had somehow managed to survive in the Vale by preying on the weak. Well, what have we here? The leader rasped, a tall, gaunt man with a jagged scar across his face, a little light fly, caught far from his home. Look at his clean clothes. He's fresh. Got anything good on him, boss? Another asked, prodding at Kael's suspended form with the tip of a rusty spear. Kael struggled against the ropes, but his efforts only tightened them. Fear, cold and familiar, gripped him. These were not mindless monsters he could scare with a flash of light. They were men, and their darkness was of a different, more calculating kind. "Let's cut him down and see," the leader said with a cruel grin, drawing a wicked-looking blade. As he stepped forward, a sound like a soft hiss cut through the air. The man grunted, a look of surprise on his face before he collapsed to the ground with a black fletched arrow protruding from his neck. His two companions froze, their eyes darting wildly into the mist. "Who's there?" "Show yourself," one of them yelled, his voice trembling. A shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom of the reeds. It moved with a fluid silence that made no sound, not even a ripple in the water. The figure was cloaked and hooded of average height, but carried an aura of immense competence and danger. Before the second scavenger could even raise his spear, the figure flowed forward, a dark iron blade appearing in one hand. There was a swift, brutal dance of movement, a flash of steel, and the second man fell with a choked gasp. The third, seeing he was outmatched, turned to flee. An arrow, seemingly appearing from nowhere, whistled through the air and struck him squarely in the back. He stumbled and fell face first into the black water. The whole encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. The silent figure approached the net, the dark iron blade held loosely at their side. With a single, precise cut, the rope holding Kael was severed, and he dropped unceremoniously to the marshy ground. His rescuer pushed back their hood, revealing the face of a young woman. She was perhaps a few years older than Kael, with sharp, angular features, skin tanned by a sun he hadn't seen in days, and piercing, intelligent eyes the color of slate. Her dark hair was braided tightly back, and a series of faded scars marked her cheek and jawline, testaments to a hard-lived life. "What's a boy from the Greenlands doing playing with glowworms in the fens?" she asked, her voice low and raspy, devoid of any warmth. She sheathed her blade and slung a masterfully crafted bow over her shoulder. "You're lucky I was hunting them, not you." Kael, still shaken, pushed himself up. "Thank you. They ambushed me." The woman snorted, a humorless sound. "Everything in the Vale is an ambush. You learn that, or you die. You're making far too much noise, both with your feet and your little light show." She began expertly stripping the scavengers of anything useful: a water skin, a whetstone, a small pouch of coins. Her movements were practical, efficient, and utterly unsentimental. "Who are you?" Kael asked, finding his footing. "Rhea," she said without looking up. "And you're the fool who's going to get himself killed. Now what's your story?" "People don't come into the Vale unless they're running from something or hunting something." Hesitantly, Kael explained his mission. He spoke of Oakhaven, the dying warding stones, and his quest to find the lost city of Eridor. As he spoke, he saw a flicker of something in her cold eyes, not belief, but a cynical curiosity. When he finished, she laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Eridor? That's a child's tale. A ghost story the elders tell to give you false hope. There are no shining cities out here, boy. Only ruins rot and things that want to eat you." "It's real," Kael insisted, his voice gaining a bit of strength. "Ilara showed me the maps." He instinctively touched his satchel. Rhea's eyes narrowed. "You have a Lightweaver map?" Suddenly her demeanor shifted. The casual dismissal was replaced by a sharp intensity. "Let me see it." Warily, Kael pulled out the ancient parchment. Rhea took it, her calloused fingers tracing the faded lines with a surprising gentleness. She studied it for a long time, her expression unreadable. "I'm not on a noble quest," she said finally, handing the map back. "I hunt. Sometimes beasts, sometimes men like these. The Vale took my family when I was a girl. I'm just returning the favor." This land is my home, my hunting ground, and my prison. She looked at him, her gaze analytical. You have the old power in you. I could feel it when you lit up. That's rare. Dangerous, but rare. A strange, unspoken understanding passed between them. They were opposites. He, the hopeful idealist on a legendary quest. She, the hardened realist bent on survival and revenge. But they were both fighting the same darkness. That map is old, Rhea said, her tone all business. The paths have changed. The fens will swallow you whole if you follow this ink. The sunken city is probably a pile of rubble, but the path you on leads through the territory of something far worse than gloomfangs or scavengers. Then what should I do? Kael asked, the weight of his impossible task pressing down on him. Rhea slung her bow back into a ready position. You, Lightweaver, are a beacon. That makes you a liability. But it could also make you useful bait. She met his gaze directly. I'm heading west, towards the Shadowfen peaks. My own business. Your city is supposedly in a valley beyond them. I'll guide you through the fens and point you in the right direction. In return, you keep your light ready and you do exactly as I say. Understood? It wasn't an offer of friendship. It was a transaction, a partnership born of pure necessity. Kael knew he had no choice. He was out of his depth, and this woman, Rhea, was a master of the very environment that was trying to kill him. Understood, he said. Good, she replied, turning to melt back into the reeds. Now keep up, stay quiet, and try not to get us both killed. Kael followed her into the gloom, the solitude of his journey suddenly broken. He had found an ally, but as he watched the grimly efficient hunter move ahead of him, he realized he may have just found a danger of a whole new kind. The days that followed blurred into a grueling routine of survival, dictated by the grim pragmatism of Rhea. The journey through the Whispering Fens was a masterclass in the brutal realities of the Vale, and Rhea was a harsh but effective teacher. She taught Kael how to walk without sound, how to read the subtle signs of the corrupted land, a tremor in the mud that signaled a mirelurk below, a sweet-smelling flower that released paralytic spores. She showed him which of the Vale's gnarled roots were edible and which were poison. Her lessons were delivered in clipped, impatient commands, but for the first time, Kael was learning to master the world that was trying to kill him, not just endure it. In turn, Kael began to prove his own worth in ways that Rhea's sharp steel and sharper instincts could not replicate. The lifestone Alara had given him acted as a compass for his spirit, and he found he could sense concentrations of shadow long before they became a visible threat, allowing them to circumvent the lairs of territorial beasts. More importantly, he learned to refine his gift. He could purify a waterskin of stagnant swamp water, transforming the black foul liquid into something clear and life-giving, with a gentle application of light. At night, instead of risking a fire, he would summon a soft, warm glow that provided just enough light to see and enough warmth to fight off the bone-deep chill, a light that seemed to soothe the ever-present whispers rather than attract predators. Slowly, a grudging respect began to form between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but a symbiotic partnership. One evening, as they shared a meal of roasted marsh roots, Rhea spoke without being prompted, her gaze lost in the gloom beyond Kael's gentle light. My younger brother Tomas, she said, her voice softer than Kael had ever heard it. He was taken by a shadeborn, dragged into the mist right from our farmstead. I was supposed to be watching him. She fell silent, the guilt and grief of years etched onto her face. I don't hunt for revenge anymore. Revenge is a luxury. I hunt because it's the only thing that makes the whispers in my head go quiet. Kael said nothing, but he understood. Everyone in this blighted land had their own whispers to fight. He simply made his light a little brighter, a little warmer, a silent offering of comfort in the oppressive dark. Their teamwork was put to its ultimate test as they neared the Shadowfen peaks, the final barrier before the Valley of Eredor. The air grew still, and a strange, melodic sound drifted through the mist. It was a beautiful, sorrowful song, and as Kael heard it, the whispers in his head took on a new, horrifying clarity. He heard his mother's voice, a woman he had never known, humming a lullaby. He heard his father's voice calling his name, telling him he was lost and should come home. "It's a veil singer," Rhea hissed, her face pale. She drew an arrow, her knuckles white. "Don't listen to it, Kael. It finds your regrets and weaves them into a song to paralyze you. It's an illusionist, fight it." But the song was too powerful. Kael saw images in the mist, the disappointed faces of the Oakhaven villagers, Ilara weeping over a dying warding stone. His hope, the very fuel of his power, began to crumble. The light he held wavered, threatening to die. "I'm failing them," he whispered, his knees growing weak. "Kael, listen to me!" Rhea's sharp voice cut through the phantoms. "It's not real. The voices are lies. It's in that cluster of weeping fungi to the left. I can see the distortion in the air, but I can't get a clear shot while it's singing. You have to break its concentration. Drown it out." Her words were an anchor. He squeezed his eyes shut, blocking out the phantoms. He clutched the lifestone, its steady warmth a single point of truth in a sea of lies. He didn't think of his fears. He thought of his purpose. He thought of the flower blooming, of clean water, of the sun he would bring back to the world. He focused all his will, all his desperate, fragile hope into a single point in his chest. The Veil Singer's song reached a crescendo of despair. But Kael found a different song within himself, a silent, powerful melody of pure light. He opened his eyes and thrust his hand forward. It was not a blast or a dome, but a concentrated, unwavering beam of pure white energy, a lance of sunlight forged in the heart of the shadow. It sliced through the mist and the illusions, striking the cluster of fungi. There was a horrific, discordant shriek as the illusion shattered, revealing a grotesque creature at its center, a bloated, pale thing with multiple mouths, which had been the source of the ethereal song. The beam of light struck it, and it dissolved into black dust and fading echoes. Silence. The phantoms, the voices, the song all gone. Only the natural whispers of the veil remained. Kael stood panting, sweat beading on his brow. Rhea lowered her bow, an expression of genuine astonishment on her face. "I've never seen anyone do that before," she said softly. After that, the veil itself seemed to hold its breath. The mists grew thinner, the air less cold. When they finally crested the last ridge of the Shadowfen peaks, they stopped, breathless. Below them lay a vast, hidden valley, shielded by the mountains. And there, in its center, lay the sunken city of Eridor. It was a city of ghosts, but it was real. Slender towers of white stone, cracked and weathered but still majestic, reached for the sky. Elegant arched bridges spanned chasms, or led to islands that rose from the surface of a great mist-covered lake that had flooded the city's lower districts. The entire place was overgrown with a strange, luminescent moss and pale, white flowers that bloomed without sunlight. And from the very heart of the city, the top of a massive central spire pulsed with a soft, ethereal, rhythmic white light, like a sleeping heart. It was the most beautiful and tragic sight Kael had ever seen. The source of his legacy, the hope for his people, lay in ruins before him. They made their way down the treacherous path into the valley. As they approached the shattered main gate of the city, an unnatural silence fell. The whispers of the veil were gone, replaced by a profound, listening quiet. It was the silence of a tomb, a place that had been asleep for centuries. "Be on your guard," Rhea whispered, drawing her dark iron blade. The sound it made as it left its sheath was unnervously loud in the stillness. "This place is old, and it is not empty. The silence is louder than any monster's roar." With Rhea in the lead, they took their first cautious steps into the lost city of Eridor. The air was cool and still, carrying the scent of wet stone and ancient dust. The next stage of Kael's journey, the search for knowledge within these hallowed and haunted ruins, had truly begun. The silence of Eridor was a living thing. As Kael and Rhea moved deeper into the sunken city, every footstep on the pale, moss-covered stones echoed into the vast stillness. They passed through grand, empty plazas and down silent colonnades, the ruins of a civilization both beautiful and dead. On the walls of the surviving structures they found magnificent murals carved into the white stone. The images, though faded, told a clear story. Elegant figures cloaked in light raising the great warding stones around the cities of men, constellations of power being drawn from a colossal crystal, and depictions of desperate battles against faceless creatures of shadow. For Kael, it was like walking through the pages of his own forgotten history. This was the legacy that flowed in his veins. Their path eventually led them to the base of a great library, its doors sealed by what looked like solid, seamless stone. At its entrance stood a silent, motionless figure, 10 feet tall, carved from the same pale rock as the city, its features smooth and indistinct. As they approached, lines of light suddenly traced across its surface, and 2 glowing blue eyes opened, fixing upon them. A lumined sentinel, an ancient guardian, had awakened. Only those who carry the spark may walk the path of knowledge. A voice boomed, seeming to emanate from the stone itself, a voice without anger or malice, a voice of pure function. Rekindle the echoes of the past, and the way shall be opened. The sentinel raised an arm and pointed towards a pattern of fist-sized, dead crystals set into the wall beside the door. They were arranged in a complex, seemingly random pattern. Kael understood immediately. It was a lock, and the key was his own inner light. He stepped forward, placing his hand over the first crystal, but hesitated. What was the sequence? A mistake could have unforeseen consequences. Wait, Rhea's sharp voice cut in. She wasn't looking at the crystals, but at the grand, domed ceiling high above them. Carved into it was a faint star chart, the very same constellations depicted in the murals of the Lightweavers channeling their power. It's not random, Kael. Look up. The pattern. It matches the stars of the winter solstice. The Lightweavers govern themselves by the celestial cycles. Start with the brightest star in the Hunter constellation. Trusting her sharp eyes, Kael found the corresponding crystal. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and channeled a gentle stream of light from his palm. The crystal drank in the energy, then began to glow with a soft, steady white light. Following Rhea's guidance, he moved from one to the next, a celestial dance of light and stone. With each awakened crystal, a low hum began to fill the air. When the final crystal in the sequence lit up, the hum crescendoed into a harmonious chord. The lines on the great stone door glowed brightly, and with a grinding sound of machinery that had been silent for centuries, it slid open. The lumen sentinel's eyes dimmed, and it became a statue once more. They had passed the test. The path through the library and beyond led them ever upward, toward the city's heart. Finally, they stood before the entrance to the central spire, the source of the rhythmic, pulsing light. Inside, they found a cavernous chamber so vast that the ceiling was lost in shadows. In the very center, suspended in the air by shimmering bands of energy, hung a magnificent crystal the size of a house. This was the Heartstone. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but it was sick. A creeping, vein-like network of black corruption spread through its core, and with every weak pulse of white light, the shadows within it pulsed as well, like a diseased heart. And standing before it, one hand resting on a shadowy vein as if caressing a pet, was a man. He was tall and gaunt, with long white hair that fell over the tattered but once elegant robes of a Lightweaver. But there was no warmth in him. His skin was unnaturally pale, and his eyes, when he turned to face them, glowed with the same violet, malevolent energy as the veil itself. Shadows coiled around his feet, moving with a life of their own. He was ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. So, the man said, his voice a dry, rustling whisper that echoed in the vast chamber. An echo of the old light has found its way home. I have felt your little spark flickering in my domain for weeks. I am Malachor, and I was the last of the Lightweavers, before I found a greater truth. You did this? Kael breathed, his voice a mixture of awe and horror. You tainted the Heartstone? You created the veil? Malachor smiled, a chilling, humorless expression. Created it? No, I merely nurtured it. The light you cherish, boy, is finite. It fades. It requires hope and sacrifice and will. It is the frantic, fleeting warmth of a dying star. The shadow, however, and the shadow is eternal. It is the silence that was before creation, and the peace that will be after all is forgotten. I grew weary of the struggle. I grew tired of fearing the end. So I embraced the one power that has no end. He had been the guardian of this place, but his fear of death and oblivion had twisted him. He had sought immortality in the only place he could find it, the endless, unchanging void. The veil is not a corruption, Malachor continued, his voice taking on a zealous fire. It is a work of art, a masterpiece of tranquility, a world without the painful, glaring light of change, a world of eternal twilight. He looked at Kael, his glowing eyes seeming to pierce his very soul. I have been waiting for someone like you. Another with the old blood. You are wasting your gift fighting for a fading candle. Join me, Kael. We are all that is left of a forgotten age. Together we can perfect this world. We can give it the gift of eternal peace. The offer hung in the air, a tempting poison, a life without struggle, without fear. But Kael saw the withered lands, the terrified villagers, the monstrous Shadeborn. The peace you offer is death, Kael said, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. A flicker of annoyance crossed Malachor's face. So be it. The echoes of the past must be silenced. He raised a hand, and the shadows at his feet lashed out like whips. Rhea fired 2 arrows in quick succession. The first dissolved into nothingness a foot from Malachor's body, consumed by his shadowy aura. The second, he caught casually in his hand and it crumbled into dust. Kael threw up a wall of golden light. The shadow tendrils slammed against it, making the barrier crackle and hiss like water on hot iron. Malachor's power was immense, oppressive. He was a master, drawing on a corrupted wellspring of energy that had been growing for centuries. Kael was a novice, holding a single flickering flame against a hurricane. You see, Malachor whispered, the sound seeming to come from everywhere at once. Your light is a shield. It resists. The shadow is an arm. It acts. With a flick of his wrist, a lance of pure darkness shot from his palm. It struck Kael's shield, and the golden wall shattered into 1,000 shards of fading light. The force of the blast threw both Kael and Rhea backward. Kael's head struck the stone floor and the world swam before his eyes. Malachor glided towards them, a triumphant, cruel smirk on his face. He raised his hand, coalescing the shadow for a final killing blow. But in that instant, the heartstone behind him let out a violent, erratic pulse. A wave of pure, untainted white light washed through the chamber. It did not harm Malachor, but it caused the shadows around him to recoil, momentarily disrupting his concentration. It was the only chance they would get. Kael now! Rhea screamed. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing Kael's arm and hauling him up. He was dazed, his energy almost completely spent. We can't fight him. Not yet. Run! She half-dragged, half-carried him out of the chamber as Malachor's cold, furious laughter echoed behind them. Run, little flame. Hide in the ruins of your own failure. But you cannot escape the city, and you cannot escape the twilight that is to come. They fled into the labyrinthine corridors of Eridor, trapped in the ancient city with the architect of their world suffering, a foe whose power seemed absolute. They found refuge deep within the city's undercroft, in a forgotten arboretum where the pale, light-starved trees had long since turned to stone. The air was thick with the dust of ages. Kael lay against a petrified root, his body aching, his spirit feeling as brittle as the stone around him. The confrontation with Malachor had stripped away his naive confidence, leaving behind a deep, chilling despair. He's too powerful, Rhea, Kael whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked at his own hands, which had felt so full of promise and now seemed weak and useless. His control of the shadow, it's absolute. He's had centuries to master it. I've had weeks. My light is just a candle against his storm. We can't win. Rhea was methodically cleaning a wound on her arm, her movements precise and economical. She finished tying the bandage and looked at him, her slate-gray eyes hard and unflinching. "So that's it? You're giving up? Did you really think a quest to save the world would be easy? That the darkness would just roll over because you asked it to?" She moved to sit opposite him, her intensity a stark contrast to his exhaustion. "Listen to me, Lightweaver. He beat us. He didn't break us. We are still breathing, and the heartstone is still pulsing. That means the fight isn't over." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "My brother didn't get a chance to fight back. The people of Oakhaven won't get a chance if that veil breaks through. You are their only chance. So you will get up, you will pull that light from wherever you've buried it, and you will fight. Because that's what we do. We don't have the luxury of despair." Her words sharp and pragmatic as her arrows cut through his self-pity. She wasn't offering him comfort. She was offering him a choice, to be a victim or to be a weapon. As he met her gaze, he remembered the moment in the spire, the flash of pure, untainted light from the heartstone itself. An idea, fragile but bright, sparked in his mind. "You're right," he said slowly, sitting up straighter. "We can't fight him. Not directly. His power comes from the shadow he has woven into the heartstone. He commands it, but he doesn't command the light that's still trapped inside." Rhea's eyes narrowed, listening. "That pulse that saved us, it was the stone itself. Fighting back," Kael continued, the idea solidifying. "What if I don't fight Malachor at all? What if I pour my light directly into the heartstone? Not to attack the shadow, but to reinforce the light that's already there, to give it the strength to heal itself from within." Rhea considered this for a long moment, weighing the strategy. "He'll never let you get close enough. The moment you touch that stone, you'll be completely vulnerable. He'll kill you in a second." "Then you have to buy me more than a second," Kael said, his eyes locking with hers. The unspoken truth of the plan hung between them. It was a suicide mission for the person running the distraction. Rhea held his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something beyond her hardened exterior. Not fear, but a profound, solemn acceptance. She gave a single, sharp nod. "I'll buy you all the time I can. Make it count, Lightweaver." They returned to the spire, not with stealth, but with purpose. Malachor was waiting for them, floating serenely before the corrupted heartstone, an arrogant smirk on his face. "Have you come back to embrace the inevitable?" "We've come back to end you," Rhea snarled, and with that, she became a blur of motion. She fired an arrow not at Malachor but at a precariously balanced stone pillar high above him. The arrow struck, and tons of rock rained down. Malachor waved a hand dismissively, and the debris turned to dust before it reached him, but his eyes were now fixed on her. The distraction had begun. "Run, Kael!" Rhea yelled. Kael sprinted for the heartstone. Malachor, realizing the true nature of their plan, hissed in fury. He sent a wave of shadow towards Kael, but Rhea was there, firing 3 arrows in rapid succession that exploded into clouds of thick, acrid smoke, momentarily obscuring his vision. It was all the time Kael needed. He leaped onto the dais, placed both his hands on the cold, vibrating surface of the colossal crystal, and closed his eyes. He poured his light into it, and his consciousness was instantly submerged. He was no longer in the chamber, but floating in an internal cosmos of warring light and shadow. He felt the stone's ancient, weary consciousness, a prisoner in its own body. He saw the threads of shadow Malachor had woven into it, a web of despair, fear, and eternal decay. Kael became a beacon, a sun in that internal night, projecting not violence but unwavering hope, purity, and the memory of life. In the physical world, Rhea fought a desperate, brilliant battle. She used the environment, her speed, and her cunning to evade Malachor's overwhelming power, leading him on a chaotic chase around the chamber. She was a gnat annoying a god, but her persistence was infuriating, forcing him to divide his attention between her and the growing light from the heartstone. Finally, Malachor's patience broke. With a roar of rage, he unleashed a torrent of shadow that caught Rhea in midair, slamming her into the far wall. She crumpled to the ground, her body broken. Inside the stone, Kael felt her fall. The pain and grief of it lanced through him, and in that moment of agony his resolve became absolute. He let go of his own identity, his own life force, and became nothing but a conduit. He gathered every good thing he had ever known, Ilara's wisdom, Lyra's laughter, Rhea's fierce courage, the warmth of the sun on his face, and pushed it all into the stone in one final, selfless surge. For them, the effect was instantaneous and absolute. A silent, incandescent wave of pure white light erupted from the heartstone. It was not a destructive blast, but a wave of total purification. It washed over the chamber, the city, and beyond. Malachor turned, his eyes wide with disbelief as the light struck him. As a being now intrinsically tied to the shadow, the pure light was anathema. It didn't burn him. It unmade him. His body dissolved, his atoms unwoven, and returned to neutrality. His final agonized shriek was swallowed by the silent, cleansing wave. Across the lands, the veil of whispers, that great wall of violet misery, began to dissolve. The cloying mists evaporated under the silent, holy light, revealing a sky and mountains that had not been seen in generations. The twisted, corrupted land sighed as the shadow was lifted, leaving behind only clean, gray stone and sleeping earth, waiting for the sun to return. Kael fell back from the heartstone, every ounce of his energy spent. The crystal now pulsed with a strong, steady, and brilliant white light, its corruption completely gone. He staggered over to Rhea's side. She was pale and still, but the light had cauterized her wounds, holding her on the very brink of death. He placed his hands on her, and drawing on the heartstone's now pure, amplified energy, he let the light flow into her, mending bone and knitting flesh. Her eyes fluttered open, finding his. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "You made it count," she whispered. Weeks later, they stood on the highest peak of the Shadowfen Mountains. The air was clean and crisp. Before them, the western land stretched out, no longer gray and purple, but bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun. The world was scarred, but it was clean. Kael was no longer the orphan boy from Oakhaven. He was a guardian, his eyes holding the wisdom of his journey. Rhea was no longer a hunter driven by ghosts. She had found a cause to live for, her gaze fixed on the future. The darkness was gone, but the world needed healers, builders, and protectors. Their quest was over, but their work was just beginning. Together they turned and began the long walk back towards the dawn.